Well, welcome everyone. Welcome to Room at the Table, Conversations on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Tonight we're featuring Dr. Tati Warren, and in a moment I'm going to introduce her and share a bit about her and her journey. Now, as we begin, I want to once again welcome you. And one of the things that we do here at Syracuse University is what we call the Haudenosaunee Acknowledgement, Land Acknowledgement. So, as we begin this meeting tonight, I'd like to acknowledge with respect the Onondaga Nation, firekeepers of the Haudenosaunee, the indigenous people on whose ancestral land Syracuse University now stands. Once again, welcome. My name is Shondice Hayes Jackson. I'm the Associate Dean here in Falk College. I oversee student services and diversity initiatives. And this evening, we are really excited to welcome a Falk Advisory Board member to speak with us and talk with us a bit about her journey. But also more importantly, she's also an alumna 2 times over. So she's going to share from that perspective as well too. So as we begin, let me just give you a little bit of background on the Room at the Table series. In 2020, this series was developed by myself. We were entering the pandemic. We are also experiencing George Floyd phenomena, as I like to call it, where people were beginning to awaken to what was happening in society around racism, classism, structuralism. And so I designed this Room at the Table series to really feature BIPOC professionals, Black, Indigenous, Latinx, people of color, people who are working in the disciplines in Falk College. The goal has always been to foster meaningful
An Alexa
conversation
app.
and to bring awareness to diverse experiences and connect the Falk community, both locally, regionally, nationally. Um, we use the metaphor of room at the table as symbolic of what is expected when one comes to a table, whether it's to eat or to work. But when we sit at a table with individuals that we know or even those we don't know, we expect that we're going to have a good time, or at least we're going to come to consensus. We expect that we're going to eat some good food, it's going to be plentiful. We'll enjoy good conversation, relax, and engage with the people at the table. So by the time that we get up from the table, we would have said, you know what, that was a good meal, or that was a good meeting. And so we all can recall when we have sat at a table where it was not a good meal and it was not a good meeting. And for many individuals of color, that often is the experience when we get into the professional realm. But we also know the other side of that is that for many people of color who are working in professional fields across our disciplines, we are really experiencing some great strides, but also in the face of, again, structuralism, racism, classism, and so forth. So if we use the same metaphor for our professional industries, the table represents a place where we find connection with the right people, where we find acceptance by the right people, unity with those people at the table, and a sense of purpose and fulfillment. We learn and we lead when we sit at the table. Most of us want to get to the table. So, this semester, Falk College is reviving this series after a hiatus. We believe that currently, in this climate of uncertainty about higher education, as being entities that promote inclusive community, we believe that while that is under attack, if you will, conversation around the principles of diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility should not cease to exist. But even more so, we should be encouraged to hold these values as core and as central to individual and collective resilience and thriving. And so, in that respect, we celebrate Dr. Tatiana Warren tonight, and we asked her to speak with us about her journey. She's our first guest, the Falk College Advisory Board member and CEO and founder of Just Tati. I believe as you listen to her, you'll be inspired by her wisdom and you'll be inspired by what she shares at the table this evening. So, once again, welcome, Dr. Warren.
Thank you.
Now, let me just describe the format, give a little bit of housekeeping here so that you're aware of how we'll conduct this webinar. We'll have about 40 to 50 minutes of discussion time. followed by about 25 to 30 minutes of questions and response. There is a Q&A box for you that you will find at the bottom of your screen that we ask you put your questions in. The questions will be read by one of our moderators, and they will be directed to our presenter. At the very end, we'll have a few moments to do some follow-up with you, and we'll share what that looks like. Okay, so are we ready to go to the table?
I'm at the table.
All right, at the table. Excellent. So with that, let me introduce our presenter and our moderators for this evening. Okay. So Dr. Tatiana Warren is a social behavioral scientist specializing in health equity. As the founder of Just Tati, which stands for teacher, author, trainer, and innovator, she consults healthcare organizations, community-based groups, universities, and government agencies to enhance and evaluate their health promotion programs. Dr. Warren's work focuses on supporting social justice initiatives and disseminating evidence-based equity topics to diverse audiences. With nearly 2 decades of experience, Dr. Warren excels in community engagement, healthcare, academia, and public health research. She holds a Bachelor and Master of Science in Exercise Physiology from Syracuse University and a Ph.D. in Public Health from the University of South Carolina. Dr. Warren has served as co-director of the Community Engagement and Dissemination Core at Johns Hopkins Center for Health Disparity Solutions, and recently joined the advisory board at Syracuse University, Falk College, where she continues to influence public policy and support student development. Welcome, Dr. Warren.
Thank you.
Now, it's also my pleasure to introduce Falk College Dean Jeremy Jordan, who in his second year at Falk has led the transition to the new College of Sport, which will launch July 1st as the first college on a high research activity campus to focus on sport-related disciplines. The College of Sport will further establish our students as industry trailblazers in high-impact areas such as sport business, community sport and wellness, human performance, and sport technology and innovation. Dean Jordan is a seasoned academic with extensive experience in sport and recreation management. He previously served as Vice Provost for Faculty Affairs at Temple University in Philadelphia, where he was also a professor and Ed Rosen Senior Research Fellow in the School of Sport, Tourism, and Hospitality Management's Department of Sport and Recreation Management. Dean Jordan was Temple's NCAA Faculty Athletics Representative and former director of its Sport Industry Research Center. Before joining Temple in 2008, Dean Jordan held faculty positions at the University of Miami, Mississippi State University, and the University of Memphis, and also served as athletic director at La Sierra University in Riverside, California. He earned a Ph.D. in sport management from the Ohio State University, a master's degree in exercise and sports science from the University of Utah, and a bachelor's degree in physical education from La Sierra. Welcome, Dean Jordan. And I do also want to introduce one of our moderators, Rocky Harmon. Rocky Harmon is an internship placement coordinator in the Health and Exercise Science Department in Falk College. And Rocky's been with us for approximately 3 years now. And we celebrate Rocky. We very much appreciate him being here as a moderator. So welcome. With that, what I'd like to do now is, as we've given our introduction, and I've shared a little bit of the overview and the history, is I'd like to begin the discussion with Dean Jordan, who will lead Tati in a series of questions, and then I'll help to moderate us throughout at the very end. Okay, so take it over, Dean Jordan.
Thanks, Dr. Hayes-Jackson, for those introductions, and especially thank you for your leadership of this program. I'm excited that we can reinvigorate room at the table and start to have some of these critical conversations again. And I can't think of a better first guest than Dr. Tati Warren. And I'm going to just full transparency, she's one of my favorite people. So I'm very excited to be here and to be part of this event. And I also want to acknowledge for some of you that are getting to know Dr. Warren for the first time, she cares deeply about this university. She cares deeply about this college. And most importantly, she cares deeply about the experience that our students have. And so I'm grateful for your commitment to the success of our students. And we're honored that you're part of our board and with us here tonight. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, D. Jordan.
Oh, you're welcome. You're very welcome. So we heard your bio, and that was helpful, but there used to be this show, you're a little bit older like me, but you remember Behind the Music, where they would kind of tell you the hidden stories. So tell us a little bit more about Dr. Warren and maybe some things we didn't learn from the bio, a little bit about your past experiences that have shaped who you are now, and maybe just a couple fun facts that we wouldn't know about you.
I appreciate that. Go Orange. It's such a pleasure to be here on this evening. Thank you again, Dean Jordan, for creating this opportunity, but really to Dr. Hayes Jackson, the visionary behind this platform and just setting the tone for Room at the Table. I love it. So I am deeply honored as a board member and as your first guest in 2025. So who is Dr. Tati Warren? You know, and really the name of my business, Just Tati, is that. It's I'm Just Tati. I'm a teacher, I'm an author, I'm a trainer, I'm an innovator. But when you peel back those layers, I'm, you know, this little Afro-Latina girl from Brooklyn, New York. Whoop whoop to all my New Yorkers who are there. Who parents migrated in the late 70s, early 80s, really chasing the American dream from Panama, Central America. Fun fact, I'm the oldest of 12 siblings. Yes, love them all dearly. But really, you know, coming here from Panama to Brooklyn, New York, trying to sort of navigate Brooklyn in the 90s and the 80s. I grew up in a community whereby we were filled with gang violence, we were filled with drugs and, you know, different unique challenges. But I also grew up in a community and an environment that really valued education and really supported young student athletes like myself. Although I was always academic, a brilliant mind, by the way, just in case you didn't know, athletics was really the foundation and really sort of a gateway or door open for me to come to Syracuse University and be recruited by other institutions. And I made my way to Syracuse in 2001, 17 years old. And I say to this day, it is the best decision that my parents could have made for me as a young adult. Because I thought Syracuse was so far from the city, right? 5 hours away. Who wants to be up there in the cold? I just want to be like, you know, close nearby with family, friends. But here I am 2 decades later since graduating. And it's just really been an honor and a pleasure to continue to serve Syracuse University, current student athletes, and just the student body as a whole. So that's who I am, just a little bit.
And for the record, as a student athlete, what was your sport and your event?
My sport was track and field. How did I not say that? So to all my track folks who are joining in, yeah, track and field. And I like to say that I was recruited as a sprinter and jumper. And then I got to Syracuse as a full scholarship athlete, and my coaches had another plan for me. So I feel like I got set up for the okie doke. I ended up training and becoming a multi-eventer. So a heptathlete, so that's 7 events. The 800-meter run, 200-meter sprint, 100-meter hurdles, shot put, long jump, javelin, high jump, and in addition, I did triple jump. So 7 events across 2 days.
That's awesome. So for the record, you're a track athlete that has to be good at a lot of different events and not just be able to focus on one. So that's very impressive.
Thank you.
I wanted, you talked a little bit about the importance of education in your family and how that's driven you. I wanted to kind of reflect a little bit on your career up to this point. And to me, it's always fascinating to hear people talk about their career path and why they made the decisions that they made. So I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about your decision to pursue the career path that you had, whether it was what you did academically while at Syracuse, or as a Ph.D. student in South Carolina. And were there specific moments or people along the way that you can reflect back on and say, yep, that's the person or that's the moment that kept me on this path?
Sure. And great question, especially for the students who are tuning in. I would like to say that I didn't necessarily choose my career, it chose me. I came to Syracuse with the hopes and dream of becoming a nurse. And so if you are from any Caribbean, country, Latin American country, you have a couple of options. You become a doctor or in the medical field. You can become a lawyer, you can become an engineer, and anything outside of that is just a non-negotiable. So I showed up at Syracuse studying nursing. Nursing is no longer, the School of Nursing is no longer there. I, in fact, was officially the last graduating class. And, it was my first semester and 9/11 happened. And I thought, man, I do not have sort of the level of emotional intelligence to navigate this career that may be sort of emotionally draining because I'm empath by nature. And I was trying to figure out how I can quickly switch out of a field that would require long hours, sleepless nights, and probably seeing a lot of tragedies. And so I was walking through the women's building one afternoon and I saw a couple of graduate students doing VO2 max testing. As you guys heard in my bio, I'm an exercise science major. And so they're doing VO2 max testing. Obviously, I'm a student athlete. I'm intrigued. I'm excited to know what's going on. And they were like, yeah, we study exercise science. And I was like, exercise science? What is that? They were like, kinesiology and, kind of like PE, kind of like PT, physical therapy. But, essentially we study how exercise helps to address different health conditions and challenges. And I was like, oh, I can study that? Like I can apply my passion as a student athlete. I can apply sort of my background in wellness up until that point, what little background I had as a 17-year-old. And I'll share more about that. But I can do this. And so I quickly jumped ship and changed majors over to exercise science. And it probably was the most rewarding and best decision ever because I had the opportunity sort of twofold. You asked about important folks and to faculty who are joining and advisors, academic advisors. It's so important that you really get an understanding of who your students are and where they're coming from. I can think about two people in particular. Scott Collier, he's in North Carolina now, but at the time he was the undergraduate academic advisor and the chair of the department, Jill Canali, Dr. Canali, who later on became my master's thesis advisor. And so Scott Collier, just was a professor, but also an academic advisor. But one thing that stood out to me about him is that he didn't just see me as an athlete. He didn't see me as a student. He saw me as a whole person, which is so important to DEI. And, I know that now. And he was really concerned about, sort of my future state. After athletics, okay, I have this goal of making it to the Olympics. What if that doesn't happen? What are you doing next, Tati? And so Scott really sort of cultivated in me sort of an interest towards research. And I started recruiting my teammates at the time to do some heart rate variability testing and VO2 max testing. And and I just, between the athletic department and the women's building, I just lived there. And then the other person that I would also sort of highlight is Dr. Anthony Robinson and Christabel Sheldon. Christabel is actually still at Syracuse. They provide oversight over the Ronald E. McNair Postbaccalaureate program. So Scott saw this opportunity for me where I could essentially get this exposure to research, get this exposure as a first generation student, to learn about research, to cultivate my skills, and to create opportunities where I could continue on to a master's degree or later a Ph.D. And so Christabel and Dr. Robinson at the time, they provided that oversight as well as the financial support and the resources and the visibility in partnership with my, department academic advisor and chair. And sort of the rest is history, if I could be honest. I became a Ronald E. McNair Fellow. And so the exercise science department sponsored me for 2 years to complete my research and my studies, my academic studies and my research in heart rate variability. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
I think it's important for all of us to reflect back on maybe someone who saw something in us that we at the time didn't see in ourselves and encouraged us to pursue, outcomes that were maybe more than we thought was achievable. So, it's important to reflect back and be grateful on that, but it's also important to think about who are you going to do that for as you move forward. And I know you've done that for many people in your career and continue to do it for our students and folks within Falk.
Most certainly. I think it's so important to pay it forward.
What brings you joy every day in your work? What gets you out of the house and doing the work that you've chosen to do? And when you think about your impact, what things do you use to evaluate that impact?
Yeah, so what brings me joy? So as an evaluator, it's important to not just focus on the numbers, right, and what the data says. And I tell folks all the time that I am not data driven, but I like to be data informed. What that means, simply put, is that we can use this information, this data, to inform the decisions that we make in our prospective fields, right? And but however, that data does not tell the full story. There may be outliers. There may be, moderating variables, hence race, socioeconomic status, educational attainment, your gender, your sexual orientation, your lived experiences. These are things sometimes that you just cannot quantify. And so storytelling, story mapping is so important about that. And I think what brings me great joy across sort of maybe all of the clients that I work with or all the projects that I've had the opportunity to work with is hearing the stories. I get an opportunity every day to work with an amazing team and amazing folks who are really sort of approach their work from a health equity lens. Like they want to know that they're making a difference. They want to know that they're buying into a mission and buying into a vision that is bigger and larger than they are. And I think that's what really brings me joy. That's what really, really brings me joy.
So as a leader, one of the things that Syracuse prides itself on, and it's been doing for a while and will continue to do, is creating an environment that's welcoming to all. And so in your role, your multiple roles, and as a leader of groups and projects and organizations, what do you do to help create or to establish an environment that's welcoming to all?
Yeah, I think that we fail to realize that we're actually more alike than we are different. And that's what I loved about being a student athlete at Syracuse. That's what I loved about being on the track team specifically. It's an individualized sport. So yes, I'm competing in 7 different events, over 2 days. And when I show up as an individual, but I also show up as an individual that's representing Syracuse University. And so I have to bring my best, right? My team members, if they are a distance runner or a cross country runner or a jumper or a sprinter or a hurdler, or a shot putter or a thrower, they have to show up and give their best. And so one of the things that I learned sort of very on through athletics and through sports is that it can sort of be a convener and or like connector, I think, of bringing people together that ordinarily like would not come together. If you think about, so indoor, I'm dating myself, but I mean, Dr. Hayes Jackson already read my bio. So indoor, Syracuse used to be a part of the Big East tournament, right? And so we host indoors Big East tournament at the Carrier Dome. And when you walk into the dome, even if you walk in there sort of present day, JMA Wireless, right? Is that the new name?
We're contractually supposed to call it that, Dr. Warren.
Thank you for the correction. And as your board member, I oblige to that. JMA Wireless, if you walk into JMA Wireless, it's a beautiful site, by the way. If you haven't visited, I encourage you to make your way to Syracuse and visit. Shameless plug. But when we would walk into that space, if you look around, and obviously we're just coming off a Super Bowl, we're coming, March Madness, etc. You will see, of course, different genders, different races, different ethnicities, different nationalities, maybe different languages spoken, most certainly different religions, and definitely different political views. But guess what? We all have in common. We're cheering for the same team. And so, that sort of becomes the denominator, of sorts, and it connects us. And I think that if we showed up, not only concerned about like your specific needs and your specific wants, you will find that other needs and wants, there's sort of this exchange. I tell folks all the time that it's not that you have an issue having an agenda. We all have agendas, right? In terms of why we do the things that we do, why we don't do the things that we don't do. But when you have a hidden agenda, that's when you run into challenges, right? And so if we can think about sort of the methodology of sport and how it provides safe space for not only the athletes, the players, but the coaches as well, right? The families that are supporting those student athletes, the fans that show up all the time, the donors, the funders, the agents. It's a well-oiled machine, and it takes sort of this multidisciplinary approach to navigate so that we win. We come out with win-win solutions. And I just wish that in DEI, if we thought about DEI as the true diversity, equity, inclusive approach that allowed for everyone to belong and feel welcomed and feel like a part of a winning team, we would not be in the challenges that we see present day.
Why do you think diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility are so critical in helping us understand social and behavioral phenomena? How do you bring that into your work to help explain population activities and health disparities?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. I'm a data girl, so I'm just going to pull sort of some high level notes and maybe walk through this. But it has so much. DEI really is fundamental to understanding both the social and behavioral phenomenon because it just influences how we interact with one another. It forms our identities. It's also about how we experience, power dynamics, systems, systematic oppression, and then also how we really respond to societal challenges, right? It gives us sort of this framework, and really it can be across various contexts. I see the same thing whether I am working with healthcare institutions or academic institutions or grassroots nonprofits. And so it's really about this broader social interaction. And if we think about it from a psychological perspective, the sociological perspective, even an economical, political, educational, or even public health, to be quite honest, where most of my work is, it really helps us to address sort of key needs in each of those domains. If we think about from the psychological, role that DEI plays, really is about self-concept and mental health, right? So experiences of marginalization, inclusion, discrimination, they can lead to stress and trauma over time. That's just the reality of it, right? That doesn't matter what group you're a part of, and they really diminish your self-esteem, right? Think about the student. That's why even at Syracuse, right, when a student comes as a freshman, there are programs at least the first week, if not the first month, to make sure that those freshmen can integrate into the culture of Syracuse University and feel welcome, right? Conversely, inclusive environments just really fosters resilience, that I think is often forgotten, belonging, and then, just positive identity development. So if we look at sort of the social structures in terms of inequalities, it really helps, DEI can really help to sort of explain the patterns that we see, in terms of disadvantages across race, across, gender, just in all facets. And so I think, from the public health standpoint, again, where most of my work is centered, we can focus on health disparities, of course, but we cannot address sort of these deep-rooted contextual factors without addressing the psychological and sociological phenomenons that we see, right? Your race, your lived experience, even me. Yes, when I show up in a space, I know that folks see me as a Black woman, and yes, I am a Black woman. I identify as that, but they may not know that I speak multiple language, that I speak Spanish, that I come from an environment that spoke primarily Spanish and patois in the household, right? So I can navigate between different cultures, but I also recognize that I have a Ph.D. now. And so there's a level of privilege that I too have, right? I went to Syracuse University. I am an orange woman, and when I show up in certain spaces, folks sort of just respect that naturally, and there is a power that comes with that. But I also own it to myself to make sure that I'm not abusing that power. And that's why I think my role on the board is sort of so important, that we think about just everyone, the students in particular, their needs.
When you think about your work and the research that you do, I mean, the name of this series is Room at the Table. So we all show up at the table with our own lived experiences, which you talked about. But to some degree, we all show up with our own biases. And as a researcher, it's very easy to bring your biases to your work. So how do you acknowledge that, and how do you minimize the impact of your biases on the research that you're doing on a larger population?
So I want to challenge everyone. How many people do we have in today's webinar? About how many folks? 85?
10,000.
10,000.
There are about 80 people here now.
I was just a little off.
Thank you, Hayes. Thank you,
rounding
Dr.
up.
Hayes Jackson. You see how Dean Jordan is manipulating the data?
It's just so good. I figured that's how many people were here. So what do you want me to do?
Well, we hope that 10,000 folks will see the replay, right? Let's say that. So, to the 10,000 viewers, I'm going to challenge you to do something that one of my professors did with us when I was a doctoral student at USC, the real USC, that is. She challenged us to get on a public city bus in good old Columbia, South Carolina, and to ride the public bus through the neighborhood. You know, just stay on one route and do a full circle from start to start. And it was so eye-opening for me. You know, growing up in Brooklyn, we take public transportation. Now, I am not a fan of public transportation anymore, but that's another soapbox. But when she had us to do this, you saw sort of all the differences in terms of the communities, the redlining, who got on the bus and when they got off the bus, and how the community sort of just changed structurally in Columbia, South Carolina, right? The tone, the energy of that atmosphere shifted, right? You saw when people may have felt uncomfortable when people got on the bus who didn't look like them or talk like them or show up like them. And so in that activity that she had us to do, I think she really was grounding us as students. Obviously, I'm a student of color. I can't change that. But as graduate doctoral students who, you know, are coming to do our work and having to serve the community on our projects, and community members, again, who may not have our lived experiences, who may not have the same access that we have to education, that it helped to sort of bring to the surface our own biases. And so that taught me a really instrumental lesson, that although I wasn't far removed from many of the folks who may have gotten on the bus on and off at a certain stop, that I started to create negative biases towards certain communities, probably because I was in environments, right, that rubbed off on me, or whatever was changing in me. And so in my own research and in my own work, I often try to just meet folks where they're at. I try to just meet them where they're at, be a listening ear, see their experiences from an assets lens and not a deficits, or like, what do you need Dr. Warren for? How can I come in and save you? And I think that, you know, when you sort of change your perspective and really check yourself, to be honest, you can really do great work. You can do great work, and you also challenge people to show up to be their best self. And then also people will see you differently. In my former work in healthcare, I was at Bon Secours Health System in Baltimore, Maryland. And I remember at the time, you know, I was living in Montgomery County. And so, you know, obviously my parents was extremely proud. They had, and Montgomery County, for those of you who don't know, was one of the richest counties in the state of Maryland, and probably the top 10 in the United States of America. And so my parents was like, baby girl has made it. You know, she has a bachelor's degree and a master's degree from Syracuse University, because that's how my mother would say it. She has a doctorate from the University of South Carolina, Carolina del Sur. And now she is in good old Montgomery County, near our nation's capital, and we're so proud of her. And I was doing about a 45 commute daily to West Baltimore. And so West Baltimore, zip code 21223, shout out to that community, because they taught me a lot about myself. But I showed up again as an evaluator, thinking that I was to come in and save this Black and brown community that looked like me. And I'm a researcher and I have all the answers to their problems and I know how to evaluate. And one gentleman, a community leader, vice president of Fayette Street Outreach, he was like, Dr. Tati, can you walk the community with me? Now, in Baltimore, Maryland, if you turn a corner, you might be on the wrong block. Okay, I'm gonna just keep it real. And so he was like, can you walk with me? And I was like, walk where, sir? Like, you want me? And if you guys have seen The Wire, Bon Secours is the hospital that's nestled in that same community. So just, for context. And I took him up on the challenge, right? I'm a competitor. I'm an athlete. And so he was taking me to all the mom and pop stores, and he was taking me to, the Miss Nixons, the Bertha Nixons, and the, Geraldine Boyds, and the leaders and the elderly in the community, and the children who wanted a playground and a safe space to play. And he was taking me over to the schools, and he was taking me over to the community centers and taking me to all of these different places. And he really sort of just opened up my mind to think differently and really approach my research and my evaluation from a posture of humility. I think that if more researchers would stop being so focused on chasing after tenure or chasing after the next publication or chasing after the next R01 or U54, yes, I'm talking to you faculty that's in here, and would just really be passionate about doing the work and remind themselves of why did they even go into this profession and go into this body of work, they would find more joy, more fulfillment. They will learn a lot more about themselves. They will show up and have a better understanding of what diversity, equity, inclusion is. And I'm saying the words, I'm intentionally saying the words. My friend Rashad Staten, he's in Baltimore, Maryland, and he always challenges me, and he says, Dr. Tati, DEI is about doing everything intentional, right? And so I want to challenge everyone of that because that's what Baltimore did for me. Yeah.
Awesome. I wrote down view people from an assets lens. I think that's a really valuable perspective to have as you engage with new communities and new individuals.
Mm-hmm. And Syracuse is like Baltimore, right? Like I remember as a student, our coaches telling us, don't go downtown, don't go off the footprint of the campus, right? But there's so much for students to learn in that space. So, why not? Like, why not? This is their opportunity to learn about the world. Like literally, they're not under their parents' domains. They probably doing some stuff on campus they don't have no business doing. Yes, I'm talking to you. You're graduating in May, so stay focused. But the students and faculty should be getting out into the broader community to do great work. Yeah.
So that raises another question, and Dr. Hayes-Jackson mentioned this. We're in a time right now where there's a lot of criticism and scrutiny on work in this space, in the DEI and A space. Talk to the students who are on this webinar who have that passion, who want to do that work, but are concerned. Will opportunities continue? Is this a wise decision? Will I be able to pursue a career in this space? What would you say to them?
I would say that you always know the fakers when they abort the mission. It's like a mom being told that, having to make the decision whether or not she's going to carry her baby to term if there is complications along the way. And as an advanced maternal mother, advanced maternal age mom, I was faced with those with the same sort of decisions, right? But I didn't abort the mission. And so I would encourage students to stay sort of focused to, your passion and your calling, and it really requires knowing who you are. It's been really disheartening to see so many sort of organizations jump ship from what they said their values were. It's been disheartening to see a lot of really great professionals sort of lose their jobs and lose their sort of livelihood and careers because of all of these changes. But again, I want to just encourage folks to sort of stay steadfast to what your calling is, and try to like ignore sort of the outside noise and influence, right? Whether Syracuse is winning or losing, I'm still going to cheer for Syracuse because I bleed orange, and that's sort of how I see it the same exact way with sticking to whether or not you want to continue to do work in the health equity space or in the DEIAB space, or you want to just ensure that whatever sort of career you show up in, you're doing so with that in mind, thinking about, again, doing everything intentional, and thinking about how others, you could leverage the assets of others, not the differences. Their differences are still our assets.
I knew this was going to happen, that we're going to, I'm just enjoying my conversation with you. And then I look up at the clock. I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm supposed to.
You get to talk to me all the time, though, Dean Jordan.
Come on.
This is not about you, sir.
All right. I got one more question, and then we're going to open it up and get some questions from the audience.
Okay. So
Falk College has a long history around social justice, and we hope that as the new Falk College of Sport, we'll be able to continue to have impact on that space. I'm wondering, given your background in sport and your work with this college as we move through the transition, what do you see are the opportunities for sport to serve as a platform to raise awareness and to drive issues around social justice in communities?
Yeah, I feel like sport, there is social responsibility also in sport. If you think about how teams may even have fundraisers, right, for social causes. I know was it fall? I feel like the time has just gone so quickly. Last fall, we hosted a symposium where I had the opportunity to moderate a discussion between Coach Felicia Leggett, Jack, and also, and also Chineze Nwagbo, who was also a former player, and Vera Jones, sports broadcaster, and all former female basketball players for Syracuse. But one of the things that sort of they talked about is how they've been able to leverage sport to do their passion projects and their social justice projects. I know, a lot of the teams at Syracuse are involved with a lot of different social justice programs and activities where they may give back to younger student athletes, like youth players. I remember when I was a student athlete at Syracuse, I would actually collect from my teammates their gently used trainers and spikes, and I would take them back to teammates back in Panama, because I also competed and represented Panama. And so, sometimes it's just like the small things, and we don't realize that it can have sort of this bigger, more lasting effect on a community. It's like if everyone does their part of the puzzle and they focused on their part of the puzzle, we would quickly put the pieces together much faster. But so often we're too busy like smacking the puzzle piece out of our brother's hand or our sister's hand. So yeah, I just think that there's so much there to explore with sport. I'm looking forward to coming on campus for our board retreat in May and having an opportunity to meet with, the researchers, the faculty there, students there, to sort of dig deeper into that. And I believe that Falk College of Sport and Human Dynamics, we're going through the changes which are challenging. But I think that Falk College would really be positioned to be a center of excellence. I really believe that wholeheartedly. And so if we think again about sport being a connector and a convener of moving sort of these social justice, issues along, right? Oftentimes, if you think about even like a post like player interview, they're not even asking them about what they just did. They'll be asking them about sort of their world views and other things that may not even be related to sport, but it's related in the sense that there is power in their voice. And if they use their voice to sort of move the needle forward on social justice issues, it makes it better for us all.
Awesome. Yeah, and you talked about earlier that sport is something that can bring people together, especially people that come from different backgrounds and experiences. So we hope that we can continue to leverage that opportunity and do the work.
Yeah, I would have never met you, Dean Jordan, if not for sport. Think about it.
See, the world's a better place because we know each other now. That's for sure. Well, listen, this isn't over, but I want to give our audience an opportunity to ask you some questions and benefit from your experience and expertise. So, Rocky, I don't know if we have some questions in the Q&A, but we'll remind people that you can put your questions in there, and Rocky will work to present those to Dr. Warren.
Okay.
Yeah, looks like we got some questions, everybody. Just so you know who this is Rocky Harmon from Syracuse Exercise Science. So our first question to Tati is, given the current political climate and increasing scrutiny around DEI initiatives, how would you approach sustaining a culture of diversity, equity, and inclusion within an organization that is considering scaling back or abandoning such DEI efforts?
I would challenge that organization in terms of like, why are they scaling back, and the reason why, the reason for that. And then I think that it is not a surprise that many organizations are scaling back because they were never in it to begin with. And so I don't know. I'm just a firm believer that when we look at sort of these like systemic and systematic issues, it's doing what it was designed to do. So stop getting frustrated and stop getting upset that you can no longer shop at Target. Or maybe you can continue shopping at Target. I don't know. It's personal decision. But stop getting upset and just align with folks who align with your mission and values. And it's okay. Like I'm not an avid tennis player. That is not necessarily like, or not tennis. I would say pickleball, right? I have a brother. He is obsessed with pickleball, right? Now, on some days, I'm going to hang out and play pickleball with him, but I'm not doing that every other day because that's not my passion area. And so I would just encourage folks that, if it's an organization for our students who are looking for careers or applying to different jobs or internships and or fellowships, one fellowship I think about all the time, it's the Roosevelt Institute. And I just want to grab my phone because they have a funky phrase that they that they say. They say, who writes the rules matter. That's what it is. Who writes the rules matter. And the Roosevelt Institute is an organization that basically prepares future leaders in social and behavioral, issues, right? Really focused on economy and democracy at sort of the passion point, and training folks to be to value DEI principles. And I think that one thing, from what they sort of say, like who write the decisions and who make up the rules, they always tend to be the winner. Like again, I'm the oldest of 12, right? I wrote a lot of rules. I made up a lot of different rules when I played games with my siblings, and it was always in favor for me to win, right? Because it's like self-preservation, right? Now everyone's approach is not like that, and so you have to do due diligence to sort of examine these organizations, whether you are a researcher who's looking for partnership, whether you are a student who is looking for a future employer, whether you are a faculty member who's looking for funding. You have to do due diligence to sort of test the water by the water, right? And look back into their historical perspective. Where were they 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago on their values and missions as it pertains to DEI?
Awesome. And I think you sounds like you might have answered this just now, but the follow-up from that was, what strategies would you use to ensure that DEI remains embedded in the organization's values and operations while navigating external pressures?
So I recently did a training for a client, a capacity mapping training, and it was to essentially sort of explore all of these partners in the greater Baltimore and DMV area in terms of their organizational capacities around sort of these issues and these initiatives. And when you sort of do an activity like that, it helps for folks to sort of brainstorm, right? And really assess, to really assess, where the needs are, where the gaps are, where there are opportunities for growth. And then I think sort of the next fold of that is that you can't do this without resources, whether it's financial resources or personnel resources. And one thing that we do know is that when we're passionate about something and we're excited about something, we put our money there. We invest in it, right? We show up on time for it, right? We prepare for it. So I would say I would start there with those strategies within organizations.
And our next question, health equity and diversity, equity, and inclusion are often discussed together, but they are distinct concepts with overlapping principles. How would you differentiate health equity from DEI, and how would you see them intersecting in efforts to improve public health outcomes?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and they are definitely distinct. DEI we've discussed in sort of great detail. Health equity is really about, healthcare access, making sure that persons have the best health outcomes, So overall, and that's primarily the work that I do is in the health equity space, right? But it does use DEIAB principles, because oftentimes in health equity, we're really looking at addressing the health disparities and doing so from the social determinants of health, right? What are those sort of intrinsic or extrinsic barriers that prevent someone from either gaining access to health or having the best health outcomes? So if I am transient in my housing and I don't have, where to live, or if I don't have a refrigerator or access to a stove to cook healthy meals, or if I don't have transportation to get to my my doctor's appointments or to my FQHC. Those things create barriers, right, for me to address my health needs and my health issues. And it's important for us, or it's important for practitioners to be able to remove those barriers. And that's essentially what DEIAB is really focused on, right? How do we, again, celebrate diversity, equity, and inclusion, but also leverage those differences in that space so that we can have sort of the best outcomes and remove barriers of social justice and racism and discrimination, right? From those systems and places. I am passionate about health equity. I was doing health equity before health equity actually started. Another fun fact for the audience and for Dean Jordan, who asked this earlier. In New York State, or I don't know, there's probably a state, but they have the Summer Youth Employment Program. And so this is a program where you can work as early as 13 and 14 and, get exposure, working and get paid. And so at 14, I was placed at a local FQHC, a federally qualified health center in Brooklyn, New York. And I was just doing sort of administrative, clerical work. I would assist like translating, right, for undocumented folks or underinsured persons. And again, this is like 25 years ago, right? And that really sort of was my first exposure to health disparities and health equity. And I learned how important cultural competency was in that space, right? And, DEI principles, I guess 25 years ago, everyone was focused on diversity. We got to be diverse. But it does us no justice if we're diverse, but we don't engage with one another. We don't have an opportunity to learn about each other. We don't include each other in decision making processes. And so I love sort of the interplay or the intersectionality between the two. But what I'm seeing now, as we've seen, the executive orders sort of roll out from our administration and president, is that they're sort of getting confound together, right? And so essentially they are slowing down and hindering, public health outcomes and the efforts and the strides that have been made the last decade, I would say, in public health.
And then there was a second part for that question. Could you provide an example of how an organization might address health equity separately from broader DEI initiatives?
Sure. I can share some health equity projects that I've been on. I won't share any current ones because of NDA agreements, but I'll go back to a previous Future Baltimore initiative. Now, this was an initiative that I was a part of that partnered two healthcare organizations, as well as three community-based organizations and three faith-based organizations. And they were really focused on how do we move the needle forward of getting folks access to healthcare, making sure that they get full wraparound services, providing the appropriate sort of clinicians, providing the technical assistance supports. And there were a lot of different sort of milestones and deliverables. And the project was really, a success in that it leveraged, again, the assets from these healthcare organizations. They got a lot of other CBOs, community-based organizations, a lot of other foundations to get involved with this work. And they were focused on the whole person, right? addressing issues around mental health, making sure that persons were stable economically, so providing a CNA, GNA training, medical training, making sure that when folks came on site, that they were assessed in terms of their self-efficacy towards achieving the best health outcomes. So again, like I talked about earlier, like if I can't feed my children, I'm not going to take my money and buy my medication for my uncontrolled diabetes or hypertension, right? That's not even a priority, because Maslow's hierarchy of needs or law tells us that I'm going to be concerned about what I'm eating, water, where I'm resting, my children, those sorts of things. And so that program really helped to sort of remove the barriers, also remove the stigma. The program had a clean and green initiative. So sometimes when folks come into communities where it may be sort of, drug infested, or they may be dealing with a lot of challenges in terms of overdose, folks automatically think about like policing that community, right? And the community was like, no, if we just clean it up, then it will deter folks from loitering on corners and, selling drugs in the open market. If we beautify the spaces and we create green spaces like urban gardens, it allows for community members to come outside more and be outside. So then it will deter some of the foot traffic that we don't want to see there. And so that's a program that I think of sort of, quickly. There are tons of programs that I'm involved with right now. But yeah.
Cool. The next one isn't really a question, just a comment.
Okay.
Dr. T, you are the boom.
I am
Next
the what?
question. You are the boom, like an explosion. So
boom, boom,
think,
boom.
There we go. Really like this next question. I can relate from Vicky.
Did they say I was the bomb? Was it a typo?
No.
Oh,
just bomb. Just boom.
Okay.
Not
Okay.
bomb.
Okay.
You are the effect of the bomb. You're the outcome.
Thanks for that, Rocky.
Yep. So next question. How can I, as a white woman who has continued to integrate DEI and continues to learn and encourage and show my support for those who have been negatively affected by recent events? I've been very discouraged not only by recent events around DEI, but also with the backlash that I've received in stating my support, specifically because I am white.
Well, thank you, my white sister. Okay. We'll start there. And I'll start with the latter part in terms of the backlash. If you're getting backlash, they weren't your friends to begin with. And so I want you to remain encouraged and faithful. I'm assuming that you probably have Black and brown friends, that you may have friends who are LGBTQIA+, that you may have friends who are impacted by all the changes that are happening. And so as an ally, and I don't know in terms of DEI what component, is it the racial component, is the socioeconomic status component, is it the sexual orientation, gender, etc. I would say to make sure that you have a good friend that you can talk to, that you are an ally for. So I don't think that you can show up for support and I think there are different levels of support. Let me say it that way. I think that there are different levels of support. And so if you are a fan, you are a fan all the way. It doesn't matter the backlash, right? No one can tell me anything about bleeding orange for Syracuse because I bleed orange, and that's what it is. I'm a diehard Syracuse University alum across all sports, across all academic achievements. Anything Syracuse in the news, you're going to hear my mouth cheering, celebrating, promoting, resharing on my platforms. And I think that you should just continue to approach DEI from that lens. One of the things that I think about also at Syracuse University, obviously, again, being on the track and field team, our team was extremely diverse. Not only diverse in terms of the sports that we played, but diverse in terms of our racial makeup, our geographical makeup, and we had international student athletes. We had teammates from the West Coast, right? My best friend, college roommate, she was from Denver, Colorado, right? And so when you think about, we used to have some like really interesting conversations as 17, 18, 19-year-olds, and we would just sort of let our guard down and ask the questions that are uncomfortable to ask or make you feel awkward or make you may make you feel like it's silly to ask those questions, right? And I just remember sort of some of those like and I won't go into any great detail, but even friends that I have now, when they ask how they can show up for me, they know how to show up for me because we're constantly communicating about these things. If you don't have these sort of difficult conversations and approach it with your friends and our colleagues and our partners, then you are not actually supporting the cause. I remember, if we go back to George Floyd, and really when sort of DEI was really booming, right? Everybody was jumping on the bandwagon. But also I remember that folks got silent, and some folks got silent because they just did not know what to say. But some folks got silent because they were in support of what had happened, right? I think that you have to be sort of, if you're going to support, you got to support and be open. And then you also got to know, again, sort of what role, like what sort of role you play in providing that support to the body of work.
Fantastic. Thank you. Next is a comment followed by some questions. First off, Dr. Tati, your humility is beautiful and rooted in getting to the heart of the matter of what affects various communities and the health of those communities. And that's the truth. So could you give some context for when you were studying at Syracuse, what was DEI? What did it look like? And what was health equity? How did it look? What were they called? And how have you benefited in your research as a result of that?
So I think that's a beautiful question. I don't know if that's coming from a student, but if it is, you rock. DEI and health equity, that didn't really exist, right? However, this is what I will say. Health disparities research, it sort of existed under that auspice and that lens, right? So again, I talked to you guys about Professor Collier, Scott Collier, who was my academic advisor and who exposed me to research, right? And I wasn't the only Black person in exercise science. I wasn't the only Black and brown person, but I was one of few. I'll just put it like that. And I remember that, they were doing heart rate variability testing. So it's when you put a person on sort of a tilt test and tilt them upside down, supine, whatever, different directions, and determine sort of how their heart responds in cardiovascular disease research. And they were doing the work, and I said to my advisor, I was like, why y'all don't got no Black folks? And really, when I asked the question, it wasn't that I was, trying to challenge, but I was naive and also wondering, like, why was, I not represented in the population that was being recruited for this study? And that's essentially became sort of the foundation of my master's thesis, right? Where I looked at differences between Blacks and whites in terms of heart rate variability and how we respond, and what what that means for cardiovascular sort of implications. And so I would just say that, that's sort of what it looked like at Syracuse. Again, sort of going back to my own privilege and power, I was a student athlete, right? So we stayed at Manley Fieldhouse quite a bit. I spent a lot of hours there training with other student athletes across other sports. And we weren't as siloed probably as they are now, right? We had the same sort of weight training facilities, and weight training coaches as the football players, as the basketball players, as the soccer players, as lacrosse, field hockey, all of the different sports, right? And so I think sort of as my personal experience as a student athlete, that sort of set the foundation for DEI. But that was not the case I recognize that was not the case for a lot of my Black and brown friends outside of athletics. They, definitely had a different experience. So personally, I would say that, in terms of who benefited from the research, my own personal research has always sort of been centered in health equity work, DEI work, before I knew how to even articulate that, right? And those principles. And, as a board member, I challenge, of course, the faculty and current students to sort of, continue that and make sure that, we're living out the mission of Falk College loudly and proudly in that space.
Solid. And so it looks like we're going to give you a break for a second, because it looks like one of our deans is going to probably be able to answer the next question best. So the question is, Syracuse University has made commitments to advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion across campus. As the political and social landscape evolves, what new initiatives or strategies is the university implementing to ensure continued growth in DEI and sustained student engagement? How is the university adapting its approach to meet the needs of an increasingly diverse student body?
I would assume that's pivoted over to me. And I did respond to this individual with some information as well. But I want to be mindful of our time because I see a few more questions. So what I'll say is that, right now, one of the things that recently occurred with the executive orders was that, most of us in the higher ed field really, kind of had to sit for a minute and take in what this is all about. What does it really mean? There was the shock, there was the awe. And then when you settled a bit, what Syracuse University realized was that, as we look at these executive orders, they're not actually laws, right? So because they're not laws, we have the opportunity to kind of look at them, dissect, place portions, pieces where they need to be, and then respond in that way. So currently, right now, that's what the university is doing, is responding to the various components of these executive orders. But within that, and this is where I come in and my colleagues, what we've done is we've kind of formed a coalition where we're really looking at the impact on, for me, it would be the students, and there are some of us that look at the faculty, the staff, and really kind of begin to understand what the needs are in response to the executive orders. Now, that's one layer. We've always had issues around diversity, equity, inclusion, and I like to say imbalance. Like Tati, I'm a alumni 2 times over, alumna, both undergrad and graduate. And I can tell you, having been here 30 years now, maybe 32, it's been slow moving, but it's been moving in terms of diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility. As you know, in terms of disability, we are well renowned for our response to what's happening in real time in the field of disability studies. LGBTQIA, also, we have strong research there and faculty that are well renowned, first in class around supporting individuals at the marriage and family therapy, psychosocial. And then the flip of that is that we also have some key areas that we have to work in with regard to what's happening right in our community. So to Tati's point, we're right in the heart of the community. It is very much like Baltimore, and there's some living lab spaces that we can engage in. So we've got a community focus, we've got a student, faculty, staff focus on campus, off campus. And what I'm going to say is, this is not fully answering your question, but in response. It's fluid now that we have the executive orders. As Dean Jordan said, we are committed to remaining a place that's welcoming to all. And I have to say it this way, when you think of welcoming to all, it's all of those boxes that you tick or look to tick when you're filling out a job application, right? They ask you, are you a veteran? They ask you about your race, and then they throw in ethnicity, but only have one or two. They don't necessarily ask about your religion, but that's a protected class. They ask you, you're male or female, and now they have some other categories. There's so many things that have evolved over time as a result of what's happening in society. So that's where we are at SU. We'll continue to serve students and support students. New and novel, initiatives I can't really speak to at this point, but they develop in response to what's happening in society and also getting feedback from students and what they are needing. I will tell you this, faculty and staff are beginning to speak a little bit more about the needs that they have. So affinity groups have been established in response. And so I don't know that I can put this information in where you all can see it. However, I'll try it. There's a link that we can provide to you all, to our Office of Diversity and Inclusion, that will clearly and succinctly spell out some of the response currently and the plan to move forward. Excuse me, we don't expect to shutter or to close anything at this point. As I started out saying, higher ed institutions are places where there should be academic freedom, freedom to speak, freedom to explore. DEIA is no different. We're not talking about hiring, we're not talking about policy, we're talking about everyday lived experiences and educating individuals. That's what we do best. We'll continue to do that as well too. So I
love that.
I think that's where we are at our time. Oh, great. Okay, I see something coming. Okay, so I'm going to give any last words, any last, Rocky, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to stop us a little bit. Were there a few more? I thought I saw a couple like accolades that would be a nice way to end this with Tati, and then we'll give her some time.
And that's what it looks like. Some things to add to your hype reel, Dr. Warren. Just appreciation for everything that you're saying. You're speaking what's true to yourself and the work that you do. And everything that you've been sharing has just been from a context of just showing intelligence and being inspiring. And especially for one individual here who shared that this is something that they don't have a whole lot of understanding and background with throughout their experience. So they just appreciate your perspective and sharing information on this topic and keeping DEI in our thoughts and understanding the importance of diversity, equity, inclusion, and being more than just those three letters by themselves.
Thank you so much. And boom. Was that the word or was it bomb?
It was boom.
BOOM.
I don't know why I keep doing that. Boom.
Well, Tati, Dr. Warren, Dr. Tati, we truly have enjoyed this time with you. You shed a lot of light here. I've got lots of little quotes, nuggets, wisdom that you shared with us. And that's what, again, this was designed for. When we leave this table, each one of us will have taken something, right? The flavoring is different for each person. But, what makes life wonderful is the spice and the flavoring. So we appreciate you. We'll have you back at the table after a year in of the College of Sport. And I think there was something here that we needed to do for you that, Steve, if you have it, I think we can put it in you've got it. Wonderful. So what you see now is, Tati, can you tell us what this is here for folks who may want to?
Sure. Thank you so much. I believe what's up, and thank you, Steve, for getting that up there. I welcome all feedback. Please, please, please scan the QR code. I think the link is also in the chat. I'm an evaluator, so I value, these post-event evaluation surveys. It's also an opportunity and ways in which you can engage with me and my work sort of beyond this space. You can share your contact information, your email, your LinkedIn profile. You can also connect with me across all platforms. My team forced me to make sure that I'm Dr. Tati Warren on all platforms. So on LinkedIn, I'm Dr. Tati Warren. Facebook, if you put in Dr. Tati Warren, it'll pull up the Just Tati page. And then also Instagram, Dr. Tati Warren. But Twitter, ResearchGate, across all platforms, you should be able to find me and connect with me. Thank you again. Thank you for this opportunity. Dr. Hayes Jackson, when you invited me to the table, I wondered sort of if I was going to be scripted. And I'm glad that wasn't the case, that, the audience could learn a little bit about me, but also learn a little bit about the rich history of DEI and its importance, I hope. And I hope that, that there was some sort of takeaways and actionable steps, get to know the community that you're serving. I hope folks get on a public bus in their local communities this week, right? And then just sort of, check your own biases as well and figure out how you can continue to support the work and support the cause, or just support a friend, be a listening ear. So I appreciate you sort of bringing life back into this session, and just bringing life into Falk College. I thank you, Dean Jordan, as well. I always call you coach. I don't know, you just sort of remind me of a coach. And I appreciate your leadership as a dean. I know that, again, there's newness on the horizon, but that means that we're also sort of, closing a chapter or transitioning from a chapter. And so I am here to continue to support you and continue to support the faculty, the students, the staff, the families, and even the great alum of Falk College. Just happy to be of service. Thank you to all of our attendees as well, and all the feedback. I really appreciate it.